Hi, I'm your host Praveen Ravisankar, and this is the Data Standard Audio Experience. We have a very exciting guest today. On our podcast, we have Antony Akisetty, data scientist and global search strategist. Today, we're speaking about his journey into data science, as well as applications within small medium manufacturing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on to the show today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. So like you said, my name is Antony Akisetty. I am an independent data scientist, and I work with a lot of marketing teams and data science teams at various manufacturers, biotechnology companies, and healthcare. I strive myself to create a new methodologies and technologies to help them take a step further in their endeavors.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm really excited to have you for this conversation today. And your career thus far has been incredibly impressive. With you first starting as an electrical engineer and then making the transition to like an independent data science consultant as you are now. How did you end up working in data science? And what has been the hardest part of transitioning?
So yeah, I mean, for the past 10 to 11 years, it never occurred to me that I'll be here like as a data scientist, and it was not even a job back then, right? So when I was finishing my engineering, I had to look for work, and at that time there was a boom in terms of like search engine optimization, and there were people selling services online, and kind of like that increased the visibility for web developers and software engineers to build new applications and everything. So that's how I entered into the web development field. So I worked at a marketing agency in Melbourne. The good thing is in engineering, you learn. It's a multifaceted course. You learn computer science, you learn engineering, you also learn a little bit of business administration and everything in there. So a part of me always liked programming, mathematics and everything. So as a developer, I was able to kind of like get into like the data collection process. I was able to build multiple software applications and everything. And slowly over the course of 10 years, I mean, you ended up being a data scientist. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a cool thing to have. Like you're a data scientist, but it's also like a cool job as well. I mean,
yeah, definitely. And what's been like, at least for you, the hardest part about being a data scientist?
I mean, the hardest part is so to keep it simple, there are multiple different segments within the data science, right? So when you branch out step back a little bit, you look at AI, ML, and deep learning, and the software engineers, database administrators, or people who are kind of like doing the data mining stuff now, it broken down into like architects, engineers, and data scientists kind of a thing. So the hardest part is to kind of like you find your fit, right? To find your fit in an organization. So if you're trying to transition, do you want to be a data scientist? Do you want to? I mean, so if you're an engineer or an analyst, there are certain things that you always do on a day-to-day basis, right? And you don't want to kind of like be there for a longer time because data science is ever growing. I mean, in the last 5 years itself, we've outgrown ourselves in terms of writing algorithms and everything, and basically we are making ourselves out of business, right? Because you now have the tools and libraries where you can run thousands of algorithms in 10 minutes. Back in the day, I mean, like just in like last 3 years, I actually took probably a day or two to kind of like write an algorithm, right? Normal linear regression or k-means clustering or something like that. Now it's like you have 10 different things that you can do at the same time. So I think the hardest part is to kind of like you find your fit, what do you want to kind of like move forward, and where are you doing that? I mean, are you doing it at a small scale, or you're doing it at a bigger scale? Are you working at the Amazon's, the Google kind of like space, or are you actually trying to kind of like improve someone's business operations, improve customer experiences or something like that? So that's kind of like the thought process that you need to have.
That's interesting. So like finding your niche is really important within data science.
Yeah, I mean, every data, I mean, not all data is very common. And even the volume and the velocity at which the data comes in is also not common. So you never can actually work at a small scale company, go directly to like an Amazon kind of service and figure out that I can. So you're always bombarded with something very new and something really exciting always.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. And do you think coming from that background helped you anyway, or was it just like what you learned within your ways of like becoming a data scientist?
I mean, yes, it absolutely does. I mean, having an engineering background absolutely helps in transitioning to the data science sphere. But I would not say I would probably recommend it, because I have friends and family and also colleagues who come from different verticals, who come from accounting or data analysts, right? Who done psychology, and they are also kind of like they're analyzing customer behaviors, and also they are a type of data scientists themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're understanding the core of data science, you need to always have an interest in math, right? Because you're more of a statistician than software engineer. You are better, right? If you're better like that. So you think of it in that way. And depending on the job as well, if you look at the job descriptions or the companies who kind of like hire you, sometimes they ask you for like an engineering, but some who you ask you for like a PhD in statistics or PhD in physics or something like that. So it's always about the job. Where are you going in? And where are you kind of like placing out? So an engineering background always helps. I mean, that's how it helped me transition from a completely field job, like an engineering, like you go out on the field, get the job done and everything. But for me, it eventually turned out that I like analytics. I like how numbers, right? I have to make narratives out of it, meaning out of it, tell a story out of it. So started to help businesses, started to see the change. Obviously, as an engineer, I wanted to do something and I wanted to see the effects of it so I can feel pleasant, right? I mean, there's something in the world that I'm actually doing that's actually working. So it happens in data science. I mean, you can, now that everything is instant, in real time, with a lot of data that's coming in, I mean, you don't necessarily have any filters everywhere. So it is a truly good experience that you can have with this one. I mean, even though you come
definitely. I mean, your story is really cool because a lot of our listeners are students that are trying to break into data scientists, or at least people that are within different industries that are trying to, get into data science because they see that it's a really cool industry. So for those people, do you have any advice or anything that, like, when you first came into the industry, were there any misconceptions that you had to get over that yourself, or any advice that you'd give to people such as that trying to break into the industry?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in my early days, where C#, Java, Hadoop, big data, this was kind of like a big thing. Yeah. So you start to see companies, recruiters, and people who hire you kind of like ask you for everything, right? Are you good at Java? Are you good at C++? Are you good at Python? I mean, anything that comes in, right? So the misconception is, be good at something. Don't just for the sake of it. If there's something coming in the industry, or if there's a hype about it, if there is a new programming language that you have to learn for it, and probably Yahoo's written something or Google has brought in some code, you don't necessarily have to kind of like jump in straight away about it. But just do your research on it. Look at how that affects your current job, and look at your career progression as well. Kind of like go through the forums and everything. But the way that I was trying, I mean, I was misconceptualized is, I have to learn everything. I have to be good at everything, so I can take the interviews properly, get the job done, and everything like that. But it's the company's choice to kind of like hire you or not, right? You may be good at R, or you may be good at Python, but maybe the company can come and ask, I only need people for Java. So it doesn't make like you actually have to be like 100% expert in Java like that. So think about it, whether it's the right choice or not, and don't overstress yourself. And data science is not a job to get stressed. It's a cool job. You have to keep your brain pleasant, because you'll have to keep thinking always, because you have people come to you with their requirements, with their problems. You probably need to find a solution with those numbers, right? You are the only person that they rely on to get the expert feedback on. Right. So it's not always that you have a magic hat and you take a rabbit out of it, but it's always kind of like you have to kind of like make sense out of these numbers, and that's why they rely on you. Right. So I would say that's kind of like the first advice I would first and the last advice I would give you. That will actually shape you to being a better person at making decisions and taking decisions. That will also give you an effect in terms of how you work in your workplace as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I actually wanted to switch over from your past journey to the work that you're currently doing. I understand that you mostly deal with small, medium manufacturers. And as someone who doesn't really know too much about the industry, would you mind explaining the biggest challenges that you face, and also the work that you do and the clients that you work with?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, small medium manufacturers is one of the niche that I deeply worked in the experience that I had in the US. And I also worked with less than $50 million revenue companies in ARR. And I also worked with the smaller companies as well, right? I mean, these are companies that are direct to consumer, B2C kind of like department.
Oh, okay.
like a background. Out of all of this, I figured one thing: there is data everywhere that the company necessarily kind of like consumes, right? So the type of data and how they consume is not necessarily thought of. So you just have lots and lots of volume coming in, but you never necessarily understood how to kind of like strategize, structure it for your consumption, and how do you want it to kind of like learn. Like the build, test, and learning model is not properly thought of. So what I've done basically was to kind of like come in and you'll have a lot of content out there for data science. You have a lot of YouTube videos, you have a lot of people talking about it, you have a lot of boot camps and exercises that people can take to learn theoretically what data science is. And then if you wanted to kind of like implement that in your workplace, you probably may not necessarily take a cost efficient decision, right? You probably are choosing for tools that are beyond what you need, right?
Yeah.
It's just like you using Microsoft Word, but you only use like a few tools in Microsoft Word. You don't use its whole spectrum of things there, right? So what I've done basically is to kind of like, it's, if you go in, you understand the business needs, right? So most of these companies, they have transactional data, they have customer behavior data, customer care data that coming from their phone calls, their contact forms, their inquiries. Some has warranty issues, some may have product problems, right? So all of this has to be mined in terms of understanding to innovate your product. Basically, what would be my next iteration, right? And that's where I come in, and I set up master data management pipelines where we create ways in which we channelize these fountains of information into silos, right? And depending on different teams, you may have an operations team, you may have an e-commerce team, you have pricing teams, you have engineering teams that you always have to feed information, right? That's how they take informed decisions, and everyone is a part of this data science team. It's not like data scientist is only kind of like doing everything, right? So I kind of like bring that culture in as well. And for companies who never had these experiences, obviously a shift, right, in an agile way of doing things. So it's obviously a practice that you'll have to keep doing it and show the outcome of it, and companies are actually trying to take that transition as well. So you don't need to invest heavily on data scientists. I mean, there's a misconception within the organizations where you need data warehouses, you need ETL tools, you probably need tools and tool sets and services, you need licenses, and it's an upwards to $1 million to like couple of $1 million a year in terms of like the budget that the company makes. But I don't necessarily feel that is important. I mean, at the moment you can actually do data science even on Excel sheets, right? You can connect multiple data sources even on your Excel sheets. I mean, it just depends on the volume at which you are actually crunching this information. And you have services like AWS that you can scale it up to enterprises, or you can use for your small medium businesses, not just AWS, for Azure, GCP, anything in that way. Yeah, I mean, long story short, that's how I kind of like transform businesses. I would call myself, this is kind of like a digital transformation where companies don't necessarily have digital tools. We transition them to digital tools and everything. So I help them take informed decisions to better make them customer experience and everything. So that's kind of like my day-to-day job. But apart from that, there is the actual data science stuff that we actually do as well, which is like building models, running tests, like hypothesis testing, and a lot of other build, learn, and test methods that we actually do as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I actually wanted to touch on like one of the last things that you said, the transition from like that these companies have to make, since AI and ML are kind of in every part now, including like HR, accounting, everything, right?
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you, how hard is it to integrate these data pipelines in companies that are seemingly resistant to wanting to adapt change, since it like messes with their entire like way of working? So what trends have you noticed, and like should companies be more open to this like going forward?
I think, I mean, with how we were affected in 2020 and the need for you to kind of like learn your customers and your, not only just customers, but your fit in the market, right? You may have a lot of competition and everything, but just holding your data in an Excel sheet or somewhere in a database and just taking your own informed decisions never helps. I would ask companies to kind of like think of it, right? How are you taking decisions? Are they data driven, or are they just experience driven? right? Or maybe you're a subject matter expert. You don't need to understand a lot of your data, right? Because multiple people, like, I mean, there are leaderships, and there are also executive people who have been doing this for the last 40 years, may not necessarily be doing the data science stuff of it, right? But in order for you to take a data-driven decision, you probably may not need to spend a week generating a report of a particular ask, but you can probably do that ASAP in like a few hours, right? So in order for you to increase that operational efficiency and also maintain your team's operational efficiency to kind of like learn every week, every day you can learn, test things out, and take and the learning outcomes that you take can be amplified by doing this on and on for like a 30, 60, 90-day model. And you can make changes on your applications, on your website, on how the customer facing front ends as well, so you to make better user experiences and everything. I strongly believe, I think the transition comes in a way where you can work with a POC, like a proof of concept. You take a subset of information, take a business unit that needs to grow, right, and understand how you are analyzing data, how are people analyzing their data, right, and what kind of volume that is coming within it, to kind of like understand the capacity at which you can take an informed decision. And out of that, you can budget out and see if you need more resources. And there are companies out there and that can help you get better at doing stuff. You don't always have to kind of like have someone in-house. You can have consulting companies kind of like come to you, and people like me, like independent consultants, can come in like in a week or two and help you strategize and build you a plan for you to execute, right? And that will actually help start off, right? So that starting point is where companies have a lot of inhibitions, or they have some previous experiences that they don't necessarily want to, because obviously companies do not necessarily have the time to implement something new. They always have something very time taking, or it's probably very busy at that time. So it's always good to kind of like have some expert come in, look at your from a high level, right? I call it the eagle eye. So someone from a high level look at that and see the ins and outs, see the gaps and everything, and could give you a different perspective. And that's how you take it forward. I mean, you will have to always evolve. You can't just be in a traditional company always. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to move on to talk about the data standard. And we at the data standard here are building a community of data enthusiasts and data thought leaders. Everyone is open to collaboration and to connect with each other. What can our community do for you?
You guys are doing a damn good job. I mean, this is obviously letting others talk, share experiences would probably rule out a lot more simpler questions that usually students or people think it's really hard. I think the channel that you have, like it connects a bridge between all of that. And we always wanted to kind of like explore new opportunities as well. I mean, we'd be open to kind of like discuss any new projects that you have. And I was always kind of like, I mean, there are competitions out there, and there are also hackathons and everything that it's really good for as a data scientist for you to kind of like get that exposure, because that really helps if you work at an organization, or if you work at a startup or something like that. Because if you look at the culture at the moment, data scientist is just not one field, right? I mean, or one kind of another thing that you do. You actually wear many hats. You go to a marketing team, you actually have to kind of like get into their understanding, get into the line of understanding to kind of like gather the requirements. So it's not like you already have like a Bible or like a template of questions that you ask every team and you get the resources, something. So I think that will probably also kind of like help a lot in terms of like from a theoretical basis or a practical basis, data standard students can also have this practical and real-time experiences from people. And and it'll probably help a lot for them to transition into better jobs.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. And also thank you for so much for coming on to our show today. And we really, really appreciated your time, and I enjoyed our conversation. But if we wanted to learn more about you or talk to you more, where can our community find you online?
Online, you can actually scan the QR code. It's linked to my website. Yeah. And you can find me on LinkedIn. It's my last name. You can find it on LinkedIn as well. That's probably the best way to find out. And if people listening to the podcast as well, if you have any questions or if you have any advice or suggestions, you can always come onto my website, or you can ping me on LinkedIn, and we can actually have a chat. I mean, this is an open field at the moment, and I'm always like to share my experiences and learn from you guys as well.
Great. Thank you so much for your information. And for more information about the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to catch you next time.
Thank you, Praveen.
Bye-bye.